In this video, I show you full spectrum dominance from Lazy Forger. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of February of 2024, we have this 22-watt diode algo laser. We have 10 pledges for the medieval Napoleonic farm. We have an all-in pledge for the current Stage Top 2 crowdfunder on My Mini Factory. And finally, we have $100 going towards the Dante's Inferno campaign on GameFound that my Patreon supporters voted upon. So go ahead and use the link below to go to my Patreon page if you're interested in getting in on that. Bob is going to be making his picks this upcoming Sunday, May the 3rd. So one of my friends told me about full spectrum dominance when I told him about my plan to try out a bunch of different war games, determining which one is my favorite for the year. And one of the criteria is that I would be able to 3D print all of the miniatures for the game. So when I found out that this was actually a 6mm scale game, I wasn't sure what to make of it because I had never played such a small scale game before. The smallest I'd ever played is 15mm. So at less than half of that scale, I was wondering what it was going to be like. But I am happy to say that the 6mm scale works fantastically because you can print out a whole army like this and be able to paint everything up relatively quickly. And you only need to play on a 3-foot by 2-foot board, which again is the coffee table size. So overall, in terms of resources, I'm sold on the 6mm scale, even though that you can scale these up to be bigger, and Lazy Forger provides all of the information on how to scale these up if you want to play at 10mm or 15mm or even more. And I know they have plans in the future to even come out with a 28mm version of this game. I did go ahead and experiment a little bit and see what the difference was between printing this out at stock 6mm versus printing it out at 15mm. But I think at the end of the day, I went ahead and decided to go with just the 6mm because, again, it's going to be faster to print out and was going to be easier to play. One of the things I did was go to the Discord channel to see what my base shapes and sizes should be. And really, they said it doesn't matter, but I did follow some of what other people were printing these out on. And all of my troops I put on these rectangles, whereas my heavy infantry over here I put on discs just to be able to differentiate them relatively quickly. But again, it doesn't really matter that much. And that's the spirit behind full spectrum dominance, is they're not going to be super picky. Pretty much they say you can house rule stuff. And overall, I think the bones of the rules is really good. And you go ahead and use the timestamps below if you want to skip ahead, because I will go through a very quick sort of gameplay demonstration. But if you want to see a really good video, go ahead and check this one out that I found online, and that's where that's the resource that I turn to try to figure out what the rules are. And you do get the rules, which I did print out here. It's a PDF. And one of the great things about getting rule sets that are PDFs is as they're updated, you're going to get that free upgrade every single time. And that's different than needing to buy a new rule book or a new codex, as they're constantly updating. For example, this is version 1.3 that came out recently. So they're going to constantly be updating the set, and you'll always have the most current version available to you as one of the purchasers for this thing. And I did buy the entire available STL file set from the recent crowdfunder that Lazy Forger did on My Mini Factory. They had one where they introduced 2 different factions, one of which is the Union here, which is my main army that I've been playing. So right now they have 4 full armies that are available. And that's when I went all in, bought all of the armies, all 4 armies, as well as some of the terrain. The terrain that you see here is from the oil refinery, which I think looks awesome. And the amount of detail on these things is amazing. I just couldn't believe that all of these tiny little rails printed out and didn't break at all. So super impressed with this. And again, when I scaled these up, 220 some percent, it still looked fantastic. The level of detail in these STL models are amazing. Kudos to Lazy Forger for providing really, really good files. Also, they come pre-supported. I didn't have to add any supports. I was able to print these out and they came out beautifully and fantastically. I did print out the bases on my FDM printer just because it's faster and easier to do that. Also, I leave a hole so that I can magnetize everything so that I can put it in my metal storage case. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check it out here where I use an IKEA Cavissel in order to transport all of my miniatures. The paint scheme that I use for both of these are a little bit different, whereas with the Tech Army that you see over here, I did just do a base spray paint of this tan color and then washed it and then did some highlighting really, really quick to paint up the Tech. The Union Army was a little bit longer because I used contrast colors over a white base coat, and there's just more colors on this army, so it just took a little bit longer to paint up rather than the Tech, which was very, very fast. But overall, I think there's so many distinctions between the different armies. I'm looking forward to trying out the other two that I haven't played yet. And each army is pretty distinct from one another, but I think there's a lot of good balance. But let's go ahead and dive into a little bit of gameplay so that you can just get a sense of how the game works and functions. I'm going to skip a lot of the details, but hopefully these couple of minutes will be able to give you a quick sense of what the game is about. Alright, so the game comes with all of the cards that you need for each one of your units. Some of them you can print out as many as you want, but the base set you are printing out multiples of some of the units. So for example here we have two cards that are identical to one another because as infantry you most likely will have more than one of these available. One of the things also is that there are also character cards which gives you special abilities. And what you're going to do is just lay these all out according to all of the units that you're fielding. The other thing that's cool is, for example, the Socrates battle rig comes with various different loadouts, and this one right here is the sharpshooter loadout, which gives you both the light cannon and the rocket pods. And so my miniature is actually WYSIWYG, where it has the rocket pods and the light cannon. So you can create and print out as many of these miniatures that are WYSIWYG as you want, which I think is one of my requirements for why I want to be able to 3D print my army, because I can just select which ones I want to print out. And at this scale it's so small. I mean, this is the size of a regular 28mm model, and this is one of the bigger mechs, so that makes it just super easy to print out the ones that you need. But let's go ahead and take a look at the gun platform, which is this bigger unit. It costs 7 points here. And I'll use that as an example. Basically, it has Command 2, which enables it to, once you activate it, enables you to be able to activate 2 other units. And they will be able to get a free activation because of the command ability. And then you're going to be placing dice here to be able to use any of these abilities. So I would need both on my dice rolls, a 1 and a 2, in order to do a systems check, which is to unpin all units in a 2 DU range. DU is distance units, and at this scale, one distance unit is 3 inches. So they're in multiples of 3 inches. And if you scale this up to 10mm or 15mm, then that will change your base DU unit. So it is agnostic in terms of which scale you're using, because you will determine your distance units based off of scale. And then again, down here at the bottom, when the unit takes damage, you're rolling to see what part of the unit is damaged. In these yellow spots, if you ever roll again, are damaged twice, and you roll again, and you hit either a 2 or 3 again in this spot, then the unit is killed. Whereas the green ones, you can have it hit that spot multiple times. So after you roll off to see who has priority, you're going to grab your activation dice pool, and it sort of depends on how many units are on the board, how many points the game is. But here I have 8 to a side, and I go ahead and roll those. And you are allowed to re-roll any number of these dice that you want. But with my gun platform, I want 4, 5, or 6 to be able to shoot the heavy cannon, and then I need a 6 to shoot my other heavy cannon if I wanted a second attack with that. or I need both a 1 and 2 to do my systems check. So I have all of the abilities that I need here except for the 6. So I'm going to go ahead and re-roll. I'm going to keep the 1 and a 2 as well as a 5, but we'll re-roll the rest trying to get some 6s. And I don't succeed, so for this turn I'm not going to be able to use that second heavy cannon. At this point you are allowed to bank your activation dice, so I start off with 8, and if I want I can go ahead and stick maybe a 5 here for my heavy cannon just to guarantee that I don't accidentally spend that somewhere else, or I can also stick the 1 and 2 if I have a lot of pinned units that are around me. So you're able to lock in dice ahead of time in order to preserve it, and this will carry over into the next round if you don't end up using it. So that's one way to be able to manage your dice resources. And you're allocating these dice to all of your other units as well, so you're not going to be able to activate every single unit in your army each round, and sometimes you're going to activate only a couple of your units each round rather than needing to activate every single one that's in your army. So that's one of the unique things about this game system. In order to activate any unit, I actually have to take the activation dice pool, which I have currently 5 left. I have to actually take one and put it in my spent pile just to activate this card, even though I have these 3 that are on there. So spending that one activates a gun platform. So let's go ahead, and here it says the movement is 1 distance unit, which is 3. So let's go ahead and move him forward. Let's pretend that this is an open spot here. So he's going to move 3 units forward, which will put him about here, so front to front. And then I'm going to go ahead and attack the Dust Riders right here in the front with my heavy cannon, which has a range of 2 to 4 DU. So here's the interesting thing. If I'm too close, I actually can't hit it. So actually I didn't need to move forward that much. Here's 2 DU here. You can go up to double the max range, but they then will get a +1 to their defense if you do double your max range. But they are within 2 to 4 distance units, and in order to attack I do need to spend this 5 dice that's in the slot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll 2d10, and I need to, in order to hit them, I go ahead and look at the Dust Riders, and their defense is 5. So I need 5s or above on this roll in order to hit them, and of course I get a 3 and a 2, which is a total whiff. But let's say I actually did hit with both of them with a 5 and a 9. Let's pretend that my roll was way luckier. And what happens at this point is then 2 hits are going to go through to the Dust Riders, which are these 3 bases. That's what it says up here, is 3 bases. And then they roll a d6, a 1d6 in order to save. So I'm just going to grab a d6, and in order to save against this 5, I'm going to first roll against the 5 hit. I need to get a 5 or a 6, which I did get a 5, so I actually block this hit. And then for this second one, that's the value I need, is the 9 in order to save. Of course you can't get a 9 on a d6, so that's an automatic hit. And with infantry, each of the bases is a hit point, so I'm going to go ahead and just remove one of them. And in this game there's alternating turns, so since the tech went, then I will go ahead and respond with my Dust Riders and activate them. Now you'll notice I didn't here, I could have went ahead and done the systems check in order to unpin, but no one is pinned around me, so I don't need to do that. So I can keep these 2 on the card. Even though it's activated, I can keep it for the next activation. So let's say I'm going to activate the Dust Riders. Again, I need to use one of my action dice in order to activate it. And if I hadn't already placed a die on here, I could just grab another die in my dice pool, activation dice pool that hasn't been spent yet, and use it for this ability, but I don't actually want to do the hit and run ability. Instead, I can shoot for free. So I roll 1d6 per base. So there's 2 bases of units left. So I'm going to go ahead and roll 2d6, and obviously they're within 2 distance units. and I got a 3 and a 1. And as you see from the gun platform, the defense is a 3, so I actually hit once with the 3. But the defense here, the gun platform as a mech, gets a 3d10 save roll. And there's only one hit of 3, so I roll all 3 dice for that one hit. And as long as one of the dice is a 3, then the shot is reflected off. And obviously I succeed with an 8 and a 9. So no damage is done there. So you go back and forth. You get cover bonuses. There's all kind of special abilities that you can have. For example, this fire control AI, I can use this ability here if I spend 1 on one of my activation dice. But overall, a game lasts maybe an hour or so. So it's very fast and quick. Let's say this was a victory point and the infantry was actually in contact with it and there wasn't another opposing team, then the tech would gain a victory point and that enables them to draw a victory card. So again, you keep this a secret, you flip it over. This is granting 4 victory points. If I keep this card without using the lower ability, it will give me 4 at the end. But if I choose to, I can have lose 1 victory point so that the value is 3 victory points in order to reorder the remaining reinforcement waves that I have. And that's one of the things is you can have reinforcement waves so that at the beginning of each round you're pulling in more units. So you're constantly taking a risk of whether or not you want to keep the higher victory points or whether or not you want to use an ability and take the less of the 2 victory points. Here are a couple other examples here in the deck of various victory points that are happening. And then there's this card that grants you 5 victory points, which is massive. So again, even if I draw less cards at the end of the battle, I can end up actually winning if I draw more VP. So as you can see, the bones of the rule set is relatively simple, and I love that you're using dice that limits the number of activations that you have, and then that you need to use dice as resources in order to pull off some of your attacks. So it is resource management with your dice. Additionally, I love that when you are damaged, that you're rolling randomly to see what part of the unit is damaged or potentially killed. I think that's a really cool mechanic. In one of the first games that I played, some of my infantry were able to take out one of their big units because of bad dice rolling on their part and was able to completely take out a battle tank. I like that somewhat randomness that happens where any unit can be heroic, and it creates those cinematic scenes that are so fun to be a part of, and one of my favorite things about wargaming. I also love the fact that all of the details is written on these cards. I think that's fantastic. It's not overly complicated. You're rolling to hit, you're rolling to defend, and that's pretty much it. And then you're rolling to see what part of the unit is damaged. So overall, I think the gameplay is relatively simple, but you do have a lot of choice because of the variety of different units that's available for you and how you can build up or specialize your army based on your style of wargaming, and that's one of the things that I really look for inside of a game. I also love the fact that it does have a VP deck, and it's variable how many points each one of these victory points are. Typically with other games where you're holding onto a VP spot on the map, everyone knows how much VP you have, so there is no mystery. But I love the fact that with these cards, you have not only mystery victory points that the person with the less cards might even potentially pull off the win after the end of 4 rounds, but you can also have strategic decisions of whether or not you want to cash in the higher points in order to utilize some of the benefit that happens at the bottom of the card. So again, that just adds a little bit more strategy behind the choices that you're making. So this is perfect for me because I hate complex rule sets where I feel like rules are just thrown in for the sake of having rules. That is a waste of time for me. I would much rather have a very simple rule set, but having a lot of strategic decisions. And Full Spectrum Dominance definitely fits that bill, and it is one of the games that I really feel like is super fun. And as a hobbyist, it's super important for me to really like the models because I'm going to be motivated to print them out and to be able to paint them. Additionally, I think the terrain looks awesome. I did also get the Flavella buildings, which look cool too, but opted to print out the oil refinery set because I just wanted to know whether or not my printer was capable of printing out such small details like the railings that's on them. Now, I still have yet to paint half of my terrain, but the painting method that I used on these are super fast, but I think makes it look cool too. So again, the fact that I was able to field 2 full armies of at least 60 points, be able to get the terrain out, print out these cards, makes it so that this is very accessible. And if you don't have a 3D printer, there's actually folks who are willing to print it out for you, and you can buy the pre-painted versions of them. But obviously it's way cheaper to just purchase a cheap 3D printer, resin printer for yourself, and to be able to print these out. I don't think you can print these out with an FDM printer just because these guys are so small and the amount of detail that you would lose on an FDM. I just don't think that I would advise you to be printing out 6mm figures on your FDM printer. I do think that if you did scale it up at least to 15mm, that might be more of a possibility. But again, I'm pretty happy with the stock 6mm size. I think this is a great starting point for my tabletop wargaming experiment that I'm doing for this year because, one, since it is small scale in terms of 6mm, I'm able to print out all of these figures relatively quickly, get them painted, which is even takes more time than printing them out and getting them to the table. It's relatively quick. Also, being able to transport them isn't hard because it just doesn't take up that much space. Although I will say that as cool as these are, they're very tall, so they're not going to fit in my cavissel, but I'm going to throw them into my baking pans and bring them separately. And I love the fact that I was able to put in some magnets and these bases that I cut out from a Cheez-Its box, but you can use a cereal box, and was able to put 5x2mm magnets on them so that I could stick them onto my cookie sheet and transport them. Overall, super happy with this game. Looking forward to playing even more and trying out different pieces. Here on the board, you don't even see half of the available options for both of the armies, so I'm looking forward to sort of expanding and trying different things out. But again, very, very happy with this game and glad that I got into it and my friend recommended it for me. So I suggest that you do check it out. Use the links below to go to Lazy Forger's My Mini Factory website where you can purchase any of these sets. I would start off obviously with getting the cards and the rule book, and then picking one army that interests you the most, and that's probably the best way to do it. You don't have to go all in like I did in printing these out, but I knew that I would need to print out an alternative army so that some of my friends could be able to play too. Hit the like button and subscribe, as I'm going to be coming out with more videos showcasing some of these game systems. Also, I'm going to be reviewing the Hey Gears resin printer that was sent to me for review, and that's the machine that I use to print out most of these miniatures. Otherwise, happy gaming. We'll see you next time.